The day my sister tried to evict me from the business I built, she wore the same perfume our mother used to wear. I remember standing in that small office, the one with the faded green blinds and the faint smell of jasmine and old printer ink. She sat across from me, my little sister, Lila, her posture straight, her expression steady, and a legal document spread neatly on the desk between us. Her hand didn't tremble when she pushed the paper toward me. Mine did. "It's nothing personal," she said. "It's just business." Those words, so clean, so cold, cut through me like thin ice cracking underfoot. I stared at her, searching for something: hesitation, guilt, even a flicker of the girl I once tucked into bed when thunderstorms scared her. But there was nothing, just a calm, Paulette distance. I felt dizzy. I wanted to speak, to scream even, but all I could do was stare at that piece of paper. My name wasn't on it anymore. The company name, the name I'd stayed up nights sketching on scrap napkins years ago, was listed under hers. I remember whispering, barely audible, "You took it." And she said, "No, I just made it official." The silence between us was unbearable. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, counting every second. My heart cracked. That was the moment I realized my little sister, the one I raised like a daughter, had stolen not just my business, but the very years of my life I'd given to build hers. If you'd met me 5 years ago, you wouldn't have thought I'd ever end up in that kind of scene. Back then, our world was small but happy, two sisters against everything life threw at us. When our parents died in that accident, I was 24, and Lila was only 15. 15. Still a child who slept with her light on, who cried when she broke a mug that had belonged to our mother. I became everything overnight: guardian, sister, parent, breadwinner. I didn't have time to grieve properly. Grief, for me, came in small, quiet bursts when the house was too silent. When I smelled our mother's perfume on Lila's old school sweater. We lived in a narrow 2-bedroom apartment over a bakery. The smell of warm bread became the rhythm of our mornings. I'd make coffee before work, leave her some pocket money for lunch, and remind her to lock the door after school. She'd always say, "Yes, ma'am," teasing me in that sing-song way. And every night, we'd sit at our little dining table, 2 plates, one candle flickering because the overhead light kept shorting out, and talk about our dreams. Mine was simple. I wanted to build something of my own, something that could give us stability. Lila wanted to be someone important. Those were her words: someone people looked up to. I used to smile when she said that, proud of her fire, her ambition. I didn't know then how sharp that ambition would one day become. When I started my small business, a handmade candle company called Kindled Light, it was nothing more than a side hustle. I sold at weekend markets, worked extra hours at the office, and learned to live on 4 hours of sleep. Lila would help sometimes, pouring wax or designing labels on my old laptop. She had a creative eye. I'll give her that. We became a team, me handling production, her helping with the social media side. "You make them, I'll make people love them," she used to say. And she did. Her charm drew people in. Her laugh made customers linger. Soon we weren't just selling candles, we were selling comfort. I remember our first big online order: 50 candles for a wedding. We danced in the kitchen that night, flour on our faces from the cake I was baking to celebrate. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "We're gonna make it, sis," she said. And for a long time, I believed her. Years passed, and the business grew faster than I could keep up with. We moved out of that cramped apartment and into a small house with a front porch. I hired 2 part-time helpers. Lila was in college by then, studying marketing, her tuition, fully paid by Kindled Light. I didn't mind. Every candle, every late night, every sacrifice, it was all for her too, because I believed that what we were building was ours. But something began to shift the year she graduated. She came home quieter, more polished, her words sharper, her clothes sleeker. She started calling the company my brand when she spoke to her friends. At first, I brushed it off. She was young, proud, excited, but the tone changed. "You really need to modernize the look," she'd say, frowning at the labels I'd printed. Or, "If you just let me take over marketing completely, we could go viral." She was probably right, but it was the way she said it, like I was a stubborn relic standing in her way. Still, I tried to keep peace. I told myself, she's my sister. She's earned her say. When she suggested trademarking the business name for protection, I didn't think twice. I even handed her the documents one evening, too tired to read them properly. If I close my eyes now, I can still see her pen moving across those papers, her handwriting elegant, deliberate, and I can still hear her say softly, "Don't worry, sis, I'll take care of it." I smiled then. because that's what I'd always done taking care of her. I never imagined she'd one day use that same promise against me. That's the cruelest thing about betrayal. It doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you've prayed for, sacrificed for, believed in when no one else did. And when it does, it doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like silence. The kind that fills a room right before everything falls apart. The first sign came quietly, so quiet, I almost ignored it. It was a Tuesday morning. The sun was spilling through the office blinds, and I was labeling a new batch of lavender candles. Lila walked in, her heels clicking on the tile floor, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't even greet me. Just said, "Yes, we'll discuss the rebranding package next week," and brushed past like I was one of the interns. When she hung up, I asked, "Rebranding package? What's that about?" "Oh," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Just something I'm working on. You'll see." Her tone light, dismissive, settled uneasily in my stomach. That was the first time I noticed it. The distance. The way she started referring to decisions as my plans instead of our plans. I brushed it off. I told myself, she's growing up. You wanted her to take initiative. But the next few weeks, little things started piling up like whispers in a crowded room. The supplier called asking to confirm Lila's payment account. Our social media password stopped working and she said, "Oh, I updated it, didn't I tell you?" Even the business email signature changed, my name quietly removed, replaced by Lila Matthews, creative director. When I brought it up, she laughed. "You're overreacting. It just looks more professional this way. People like dealing with one face of the brand." One face? Her face. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, but inside, something tightened. A small, sharp knot of unease I didn't know how to untangle. One night, while doing inventory, I found a folder tucked into the back of our shared filing cabinet. It was labeled Kindled Light Trademark. My heart skipped. I didn't remember filing anything under that name. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling slightly. Inside were printed documents, official ones, with Lila's name on every line where mine should have been. Applicant, Lila Matthews. Owner, Lila Matthews. Authorized signatory, Lila Matthews. My name wasn't anywhere. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. My fingers went numb. It was like reading my own obituary, watching something I had built from the ground up be claimed by someone else. Someone I loved. But I didn't confront her right away. No. I folded the papers neatly, slid them back into the folder, and placed it exactly where I found it. Because a part of me didn't want to believe what my eyes were telling me. I told myself maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she'd filed it temporarily in her name for convenience. Maybe she meant to include me later. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to believe that. So I said nothing. That weekend, we had dinner at our mother's favorite restaurant, a small Italian place with red tablecloths and too much garlic and everything. It had always been our place. Birthdays, graduations, even the night we sold our first 500 candles, we'd celebrated there. But that night, it felt different. Lila arrived late, dressed in a crisp white blazer, her phone glued to her hand. She talked fast about branding partners, media outreach, and investor calls. I could barely follow. "Finally," I said softly. "You've been busy lately." She smiled. That polite kind of smile you give someone you've already outgrown. "I have to be," she said. "You know how the market is. We can't stay small forever." "We?" I asked, my voice a little too sharp. Her eyes flickered up for a second. "Of course, we." But I noticed she didn't say my name. That night, when she dropped me home, she hugged me quickly like she was doing me a favor. Her perfume lingered long after she left, sweet and heavy, like guilt disguised as flowers. In the following months, she began spending less and less time at the workshop. Meetings, she'd say, networking. Sometimes, she'd disappear for whole days, leaving the rest of us scrambling to meet orders. When I asked where she'd been, she'd shrug and say, "Building the brand, sis. You wouldn't understand the digital side." Her words stung not because she was wrong, but because she knew exactly how to make me feel small. In the following months, she began spending less and less time at the workshop. Meetings, she'd say. Networking. Sometimes she'd disappear for whole days, leaving the rest of us scrambling to meet orders. When I asked where she'd been, she'd shrug and say, "Building the brand, sis. You wouldn't understand the digital side." Her words stung not because she was wrong, but because she knew exactly how to make me feel small. Then came the second sign. A small moment. Almost nothing except that it changed everything for me. One morning, a supplier called asking to confirm a bulk order for the new store location. "New store?" I asked, my voice catching. "Yes," the man said cheerfully. "The one in her name, Miss Matthews. She said it's her own line, but inspired by your original. Her own line. My hands went cold. That night, when Lila came home, I asked her directly, "What's this about a new store?" She looked surprised for a second, then smiled too smoothly. "Oh, that? Just a side project. You wouldn't be interested in that side of things." "Side project using our brand name?" She crossed her arms. "I've been the face of this brand for years. Don't make it sound like I'm stealing." I stared at her, searching for any trace of remorse, any flicker of that little girl I'd once protected. But all I saw was ambition, a cold, hungry kind that looked right through me. I didn't say another word that night. I just went to my room, shut the door, and for the first time since our parents died, I cried. Not loud, messy sobs. Quiet tears that came from somewhere deep inside, the kind that come when you realize love alone won't protect you anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought running through my mind. I need to know the truth. So I made myself a cup of black coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. I searched for the business name Kindled Light, and there it was. Registered trademark, Lila Matthews. Owner and Managing Director, Lila Matthews. Date of registration, 6 months ago. Simon. That meant she'd done it long before the first suspicion ever crossed my mind. She had planned it. Don't worry, I'll handle it. It's just business. Every late-night email she sent without copying me. She had built a world where I no longer existed. And the worst part? I had handed her the keys. I closed the laptop, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't even realize I was whispering until I heard my own voice say it aloud. She stole my life. That was the moment the denial died. And in its place came something I hadn't felt in years. The morning after I found out, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders, watching dawn creep in slow and pale. The neighborhood dogs barked at nothing. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed like it was mocking me. For the first time, I realized I was afraid of what I might find if I kept digging. But fear, when you've lost everything else, can become fuel. So I spent that day going through every document, email, and invoice tied to Kindled Light. Each discovery hit like a blow. The website domain transferred to her name. The supplier contracts signed under her new LLC. Even the customer email list I'd built painstakingly over years moved to her marketing database. It was all gone. Every thread that once tied me to the business now led back to her. By late afternoon, I was shaking not from anger anymore, but from the rawness of it. I hadn't eaten, hadn't drunk anything but cold coffee. Then I opened my email and saw a message I'll never forget. Subject: Notice of ownership transfer. It was from her lawyer. Dear Miss Matthews, as per our client's registration and intellectual property rights, the brand Kindled Light now belongs solely to Miss Lila Matthews. We kindly ask you to vacate the business premises within 14 days to facilitate the transition. Regards, Dawson and Cole Law Offices. Vacate the premises. My own office. My own shelves. My own hands work. The world spun. I dropped my coffee mug, and it shattered across the tile, sharp, echoing. That's how she wanted to tell me. Through a lawyer. I remember calling her immediately. She didn't pick up. The second time, she did, her voice calm, slightly annoyed, like I'd interrupted her lunch. Hey, can I call you back? I'm in a meeting. Lila. My voice came out rough. You sent me an eviction notice. A pause, then a light laugh. Oh, that. It's just a formality. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? My voice rose, trembling. You took my business, my life's work, and you're telling me it's not personal? She sighed. I didn't take it. I made it official. You always said we needed to grow, to professionalize. That's what I'm doing. You're just not part of that next step. My throat closed. You wouldn't have a next step without me. I raised you. And I'm grateful. She cut in, her tone softening but still cold. But maybe it's time you let me lead. You've done enough. Done enough. The words hung there, like a blade between us. I wanted to yell, to curse, to remind her of every night I stayed up working so she could have a normal childhood. But instead, I went quiet. Silence sometimes is heavier than any scream. When she realized I wasn't responding, she said gently, Don't make this harder than it needs to be, okay? We can both move on peacefully. And then she hung up. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, hearing nothing but my own breath. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not cleanly, but in a jagged, splintering way that doesn't heal easily. The next few days passed like a blur. The workshop looked the same, candles lined neatly on the shelves, the faint smell of vanilla and rosewood in the air, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Every box, every label felt like a ghost of what I'd built. The girls who worked for me looked confused. They asked, Is it true, ma'am? Is Miss Lila the new owner? I didn't know what to say. I just smiled faintly and told them, keep working. I'll handle it. But the truth was I didn't know if I could handle it. That weekend, I went to visit my parents' graves for the first time in months. The air was heavy with the scent of wet soil and marigolds. I sat between their headstones, the way I used to sit between them on long car rides when I was little. Mom, I whispered, I don't know what I did wrong. A breeze rustled through the trees, soft and hollow. I closed my eyes, and for a brief second, I saw Lila's face the way it used to be, laughing. Young, eyes bright with trust. How did we get here? I murmured. How did I lose her? I didn't get an answer, of course. But speaking the words out loud helped me find something steadier inside myself. A clarity. Because as much as it broke my heart, I knew this. If I didn't fight for what I built, she'd bury me completely. And not just me, the part of our parents that lived through this dream. That night, I packed up every record, receipt, and design sketch I still had in my possession. I organized them on my living room floor, surrounded by candlelight. Ironic, really, considering how much of my life had burned because of this. I created a folder labeled Proof of Origin. It included dated invoices, my first business registration attempt from years ago, hand-drawn label designs signed with my initials, and even photos from the early market days with me standing beside our stall. Everything I could find that tied kindled light to me, to us. And then, I made one more folder. Emails from Lila. I scrolled back through every message she'd ever sent me about the business those late night. You handle the production. I'll do the rest ones. And the don't worry, I'll file it for us. Each one a small confession, hidden in plain sight. By midnight, I had everything ready. My plan wasn't revenge, it was truth. The next morning, I posted a long, calm statement on our business social media account, the one she had locked me out of. But I'd been smarter than I realized. I still had the recovery email. The post read, to our loyal customers, this company was born out of love, grief, and the belief that light can come from the darkest places. I started Kindled Light after losing my parents, with my little sister by my side. I raised her, and together we built this from scratch, every candle, every label, every sleepless night. It breaks my heart to say that the person I built it with has now taken it from me legally, quietly, and completely. I'm not here for pity. I just want the truth to be known. I hit post and sat back. For a long while, nothing happened. Then, my phone started buzzing. One notification, then another, then another. People were commenting, customers, friends, even old neighbors. Some were shocked, some angry. Some said they'd noticed Lila's new tone online and felt something was off. By evening, it had gone viral. Lila called. I didn't answer. Then she showed up at my door. She didn't look calm this time. Her hair was messy, her eyes red-rimmed. How could you? She hissed the moment I opened the door. You're ruining everything! I didn't move aside. No, Lila. You ruined everything the moment you forgot who we were. Her lips trembled. I built this too. You think you're the only one who worked hard? I was the one people followed, the one who made it grow. You were just making candles. Her words were knives. But I stood tall. Maybe. But those candles built your education, your home, your career. You don't get to erase me from my own story. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something break in her eyes. Why couldn't you just be happy for me? She whispered. Why couldn't you let me have something of my own? I almost faltered. Almost. Because beneath the greed, I heard something else hurt, maybe. Resentment. The kind that festers when gratitude turns sour. But I couldn't let it soften me now. You could have had anything, I said quietly. All you had to do was ask. And then, I closed the door. That night, she went silent online. But the world didn't. People started asking questions. Old customers dug up screenshots, tagged articles, shared photos of me at the original stalls. The truth had begun to surface, and there was no stopping it now. The morning after my post went viral, I woke to 100 unread messages. Some from customers offering support, others from reporters wanting a human interest piece. But the one message that caught my breath was from her. Lila, you went too far, Maya. We can still fix this quietly. Delete the post before it ruins us both. Ruins us. Even now, she wanted to sound like we were on the same side. But I wasn't the scared older sister anymore. The one who cleaned up her messes and shielded her from consequences. No. This time, she'd have to face what she'd done. Still, I didn't respond, not yet. I'd learned that silence could be more powerful than shouting. I spent that morning sorting through more records, preparing for the legal storm that I knew was coming. I visited a lawyer, an older man named Mr. Shaw, who'd been recommended by one of our longtime suppliers. His office smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish. He listened quietly as I told him everything from the night my parents died to the moment my sister handed me that eviction notice. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, hands clasped over his stomach. "She filed under her own name, yes," he said slowly. "But if you can prove the business existed, and that you operated it publicly before her registration, there's a case for prior ownership, especially if you have evidence of her intent to deceive." I nodded, my pulse steady for the first time in days. "I have all of that." He smiled faintly. "Then, Miss Matthews, I'd say your sister's going to have a hard time explaining herself." That afternoon, I met with my small team, the 2 women who'd worked beside me for years. When I told them the truth, neither looked surprised. "We knew something was wrong," Sarah said softly. "She started treating us like we were lucky to still have jobs." The other girl, Nina, crossed her arms. "If you start again, we're with you." Those words, simple as they were, brought tears to my eyes, because I realized that while Lila had stolen a brand, she hadn't taken the heart of it. The people, the trust, the love that still lived in the hands that made the candles, not the one that printed her name on a trademark. In the days that followed, I stayed quiet online while Lila scrambled. She posted a series of cold, defensive statements claiming that I was distorting the facts and that kindled light had always been her vision. But people didn't buy it. They'd seen the old photos, the timestamps, the archived posts from years ago with captions like, "Proud of my sister for building this from scratch." Screenshots can outlive lies. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't argue. I let the truth speak for itself. My energy went towards something else, something better. I started working on a new idea, a new brand, not a copy, not a revenge business, but something that carried my true story in its core. I called it Ember and Grace. Ember, because even after everything burns, there's always a small light left. And Grace, because I needed to remember that forgiveness, whether she deserved it or not, was for me, not her. The first batch of candles I poured was made with steady hands. The wax shimmered in the light, smooth and unbroken. I chose scents that reminded me of beginnings: fresh linen, cedarwood, and honey. When I posted the announcement online, I didn't mention her name once. I didn't need to. The caption read, "Some flames burn out, some are stolen, but the truest light never dies, it finds a new home." 2 weeks later, I got a letter from her lawyer. Cease and desist. They claimed my new brand was intentionally misleading and damaging to the kindled light trademark. I took the letter straight to Mr. Shaw. He chuckled quietly, sliding it across his desk. "Desperation," he said simply. "They know they're losing the public narrative." Then he tapped the corner of my evidence folder. "Keep moving forward. File your counterclaim. Don't waste energy fighting her online, fight her in the right place." So I did. The day of the hearing came fast. It wasn't a grand courtroom drama, just a modest hearing room with a long table, a stern judge, and 2 bright fluorescent lights. Lila sat across from me in a navy blue suit, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. For a fleeting second, I saw the girl who once braided her hair in my lap, who cried when she scraped her knees. Then she met my eyes with something else entirely: cold calculation. The lawyer spoke. The documents were exchanged. And when it was my turn, I handed over the folder labeled Proof of Origin. Inside were photographs, dated receipts, and the most crucial piece, our first ever registration attempt, under my name, with her listed as assistant. The judge leafed through it silently, then looked at Lila. "Miss Matthews," he said, "can you explain why your sister's name appears on the earliest documentation but not on the later trademark?" Her face went pale. She didn't handle the business side. I did. The judge nodded slowly. "And yet the financial statements and communications clearly originate from her accounts." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence, the kind that fills a room when truth starts to show its face. Finally, he said, "It appears on the balance of evidence that this business was established and operated by Miss Maya Matthews before Miss Lila Matthews filed any trademarks. Temporary ownership will revert to the original founder pending further review." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes and breathed, because for the first time in months I felt free. Lila didn't look at me as we left the building. Outside, she walked fast, her heels striking the pavement hard. When I caught up, she finally turned. Her eyes were wet, not with anger this time, but something softer. Shame, maybe. "Are you happy now?" she whispered. I shook my head gently. "No, Lila, I'm just done being silent." She looked down, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted something that was mine. I sighed. It was yours. It was ours, but you couldn't see that. She swallowed, nodding faintly. I'm sorry, she said. So quietly, I almost missed it. I wanted to forgive her in that moment, I really did. But forgiveness isn't something you rush. It's something that takes root slowly, like new growth after a fire. So I said, I know, and walked away. That night, I didn't light any candles. I sat in the dark with the window open, listening to the city hum. For the first time in years, the silence felt like peace, not loss. And as the wind slipped through the curtains, carrying the faint scent of honey and wax, I whispered, maybe this is what healing smells like. 3 months passed. The world, as it always does, moved on. The court case was settled quietly. Lila withdrew her claims before the second hearing. She kept her silence, issued a half-hearted apology through her lawyer, and disappeared from social media. But the real noise was happening elsewhere on mine. The story of Kindled Light had become something bigger than us. People weren't just talking about a stolen business. They were talking about trust, family, and the cost of ambition. Every day, my inbox filled with messages, some from women who'd been betrayed by their own blood, others from small business owners who said, you reminded me to keep fighting. I never expected to become anyone's symbol of strength. I was just a woman trying to breathe again after the smoke. By the time spring came, Ember and Grace had bloomed into something beautiful. We sold out our first 3 candle collections, each inspired by a chapter of my own story. Ash and Honey, for the sweetness that survives even after the burn. Homecoming, for the scent of cedar and lemon balm, like old doors opening again. Second Flame, a soft blend of lavender and sandalwood, meant to remind people that light can return. Each label carried a small inscription, for anyone who lost what they built, and built again. People didn't just buy candles. They bought pieces of a journey they'd seen unfold in real time. And though I never said her name again publicly, everyone knew what had happened. It wasn't revenge. It was resonance. One afternoon, as I was preparing orders in the studio, my phone buzzed. It was a number I hadn't seen in months. Lila. I hesitated, then answered. Maya, she said, her voice quieter than I remembered. I didn't think you'd pick up. I almost didn't. A pause. Then she exhaled. I saw the new brand. It's beautiful. You did it. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part, the one that still remembered sharing bunk beds and birthday cakes, wanted to just listen. Thank you, I said finally. I wanted to call, she continued, because I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out why I did what I did. I know you don't owe me forgiveness, but I needed to tell you. I'm sorry, for all of it. The words didn't sting, they landed gently, like ashes settling. I hope you mean that, I said. I do. I lost everything, Maya. And I deserved to. But watching you rebuild, it made me realize I was never competing with you. I was competing with the part of me that thought I wasn't enough. I closed my eyes, letting the silence fill the space between us. Then I said softly, we both lost something, Lila. But maybe we both found something too. She sniffed, a broken laugh slipping through. You always were the poetic one. I smiled faintly. Guess I had to be. You took all the legal smarts. We both laughed, then awkward. Fragile, but real. And for a moment, it felt like 2 sisters standing in the same room again, even if only through a phone line. Before hanging up, she said, maybe one day we can light a candle together again. Maybe, I said. But for now, let's let the wax cool. After that, I didn't hear from her again. But I didn't need to. Some goodbyes are meant to echo quietly, not crash. Summer came. I was invited to speak at a local small business event, something called Founders Rising. I stood on stage, a microphone trembling slightly in my hand, facing a room of people who looked exactly like I once did, tired, hopeful, terrified of failure. And when it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about betrayal or court cases. I talked about rebuilding. When you lose what you built, I said, it's easy to think your light's gone out. But light doesn't disappear, it changes form. Sometimes it flickers, sometimes it hides, sometimes it waits for you to remember that you were the fire all along. I saw tears in the audience, nods, and for the first time, I understood something simple but profound. My pain had turned into someone else's map. After the event, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a small box in her hands. I wanted to give you this, she said. Inside was a candle handmade, lavender scented, with a small label that read, You helped me start again. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I whispered. As she walked away, I realized that healing isn't about erasing the scars. It's about learning to use them as light sources. Months later, Ember and Grace was featured in a local magazine. The article headline read, "From Betrayal to Brilliance: How One Woman Rebuilt Her Business and Her Life." They took photos in my studio's sunlight, streaming through the windows, candles lined in neat rows. The journalist asked, "What would you say to someone who's been betrayed by the person they trusted most?" I thought for a long moment before answering. I'd tell them that betrayal doesn't define you. What you do afterward does. You can drown in bitterness, or you can rise in grace. The choice is yours. That night, I walked home through the quiet streets. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. I passed by the little shop that used to be ours kindled light. It was empty now. Dark windows. A faded for lease sign taped to the glass. For a second, I stood there, watching my reflection in the window, two silhouettes. One past, one present. And then I smiled, because for the first time I didn't feel loss. I felt release. I turned and kept walking. A few weeks later, on the anniversary of the day I first started making candles, I did something small. I went to my parents' old home, the one with the porch and the maple tree, and sat on the steps as the sun set. I lit one candle, just one. The scent of cedar and honey drifted through the air, and as the flame flickered, I whispered to the wind, "You taught me that light doesn't need to be loud to be strong." For a moment, I swore I could feel them there, their warmth, their pride. As I packed up to leave, I looked at the tiny glow and smiled, because that was the thing about fire. Even after the darkest nights, it always finds a way back. And maybe, so did I. Soft piano music plays. The sound of a match strikes, followed by a quiet inhale. My name is Maya Matthews, and this was the story of how I lost everything I built, only to discover I was never the business. I was the flame.